You forced your way into our city. My king, it is as I warned. Humans will never leave us alone.
Is he like this with all women?
Usually, he's worse.
Ow!
Black Bolt's reign is done, little Triton. Long live King Maximus.
Maximus is brother to the king. We call him Maximus the Mad.
Number 10, Maximus the Mad. I just like the look of Maximus the Mad here. We don't get to see too much of him or the other Inhumans, but what I like about him and them is kind of just that. They're more alluring when they're kept mysterious. Maximus, in case you didn't know, is the brother to Black Bolt. In the Earth 616 universe, he is known as Maximus the Mad, as I believe he's also known here. He is often depicted as such in terms of his appearance in the 616 continuity, and is also made to look somewhat more flamboyant in comparison to his Earth 1610, his Ultimate Universe counterpart. I do love that Maximus just looks like a normal dude in the Ultimate Universe, because also I just feel like just because you're mad doesn't mean you look different, you know what I mean? You just look normal. I think that actually makes him more frightening to me as well, that he just looks so normal, so average. Especially among the rest of the Inhumans, who all look pretty freaky, stand out, and honestly somewhat monstrous here. This more bleak take on the whole group in the Ultimate Universe makes me want to see a film version of them that was more of like a supernatural horror. Especially considering they consider Attilan to actually be like a heaven here, yet it's so dark. I believe based on this depiction, there could be promise in something like a supernatural horror film version of them. Number 9, Gregory Stark. Sorry Arno, move over, Gregory is here. I like Arno Stark, okay, but Gregory was a pretty cool villain to have, and he wasn't the secret brother of Iron Man either. Gregory is actually not just known, he's often more well liked than Tony is in the Ultimate Universe, at least initially. Tony is seen as being a bit of a loose cannon in comparison to his older twin brother, you see, who constantly has things way more together and is also super wicked smart. But that also works well for Gregory's character, as he also turns out to be, you guessed it, a bad guy. Of course, no one can be that good. We should have known. Gregory manipulated S.H.I.E.L.D. in order to get full control of it, and when all the pieces were in play, basically attempted to take over the world. He had to be taken out by Tony Stark, but in a much more permanent way than Tony when he dealt with Arno in the Earth 616 reality. Tony, in part, actually helped to kill his brother. He used an EMP to disrupt his nanites, which made Gregory critically vulnerable to an attack from Thor. Ouch. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list, be sure to head on over to Facebook to show us some love, where you can give us a follow, a like, and check out all the cool content we have over there. Number 8, Crystal. I really love the original Crystal, especially in terms of her appearance, but I also do love the super rebellious vibes we get from Earth 1610 Ultimate Crystal in this narrative. Here, Crystal is still the little sister of Medusa, but this group of Inhumans, Medusa included, are even less likely to mingle with humans. They simply want to live a completely separate and simple life, which bothers Crystal, who it seems is searching for something more, something outside of her own family. Acting out, she runs away from her people, not eager to play the loyal member of the royal court, and not fond of her fiance, Black Bolt's brother, Maximus the Mad. Yeah, they're engaged in this reality. She runs into the Fantastic Four, and in so doing kind of reveals to them the secret location of Attilan as they pursue her after she is retrieved by her people. Crystal ends up deciding to stay with the Inhumans too, despite her unhappiness, which I also think is an interesting choice, and it gets me wanting to know more about both Crystal and the Inhumans in this universe. Cause like the Fantastic Four were also just like, you come chill with us, but she's like, nah, this is how it's gotta be, even though I definitely was not super here for this, but I still gotta stick with my fam. Number 7, Nick Fury. The Nick Fury of the Ultimate Universe Earth 1610 isn't perfect. In fact, he can kind of seem like he's being a butt a lot of the time, but in reality, it's just that Nick Fury often doesn't trust people. He keeps his plans and reasons behind them close to his chest, and while you might not understand them and therefore think he's callous, he's often just trying to make the hard call. Nick Fury has some flaws, I'll grant you, especially if we're talking about his relationship with his ex-wife and everything that apparently went wrong there. But this version of the character would become so beloved that he actually go on to inspire an Earth Earth 616 counterpart in Nick Fury Jr., and of course would inspire the version of the character we saw up on the big screen in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where he was portrayed by the one and only Samuel L. Jackson. Samuel L. Jackson in fact also served as inspiration for the 1610 counterpart in the comics when it came to his appearance, and Mr. Jackson was actually the character's first pick, of course, when asked in canon who would be best to portray him in a film. Number 6. Black Bolt. Black Bolt is already menacing over on Earth 616, at least I would say in modern comics he is, but on Earth 1610 he is really menacing. We see Black Bolt for an even shorter time than Crystal, but honestly it only adds to the mystery of the character, making him appear more intimidating. The colors by June Chung during his appearance in Ultimate Fantastic Four Annual Issue number 1 really help the character to pop as well, and the pencils by Jay Lee also add to the presence of his appearance. He might not say much, but he really doesn't need to here. This is a very muscular, dark, and yet blindingly bright Black Bolt with the white lines of his costume reminding me of lightning. Black Bolt simply appears basically to destroy Attilan so they might find a new secret home, as their current one in the Himalayas has been revealed to the FF, and you know, it's supposed to be secret. Aside from that, he also communicates how disappointed he is in Crystal. Honestly, I would not want this Black Bolt to be disappointed in me. I would be like walking on eggshells with him if he was like, I'm slightly disappointed in you, Amanda. Or you know, just stared at me and looked disappointed, because he couldn't really say that. He can only shout, well, he does shout to destroy Attilan, basically that he's disappointed, so there you go. Even the Rebellious Crystal seems to be affected by Black Bolt's guilt tripping though, agreeing to remain with her people despite being offered a place among the humans and the Fantastic Four. I mean, he doesn't even shout to destroy Attilan. What am I saying? He like just says a word. That's also how powerful this version of him is. He's like, I'll just say a word, Crystal, your disappointment, and then it all just wipes away. Number 5. Medusa. Honestly, I would say pretty much all of the Inhumans at this point of the Ultimate Universe are the coolest versions around, hence why I have so many of them on this list, or at least, you know, one of the coolest versions of the Inhumans around. I would say the coolest though. I think they are the coolest. Medusa is no exception, possibly having my most favorite redesign when it comes to her character. The Medusa of Earth 1610 is still Black Bolt's queen, but seems to have been named for her familiarity and appearance to the Gorgon of mythos, Medusa. This version of Medusa has snakes for hair. She also happens to be steadfastly loyal to her people. As I said before, we don't get to see too much of the Inhumans, but we do know that Medusa believes the Inhumans are basically superior to humans, and that distance should be maintained between their race and the humans in order to basically preserve their own culture and their own abilities. Medusa also expresses here that she has come to love her husband and accept him for who he is, despite the fact that he can never really show his love for her, at least not vocally. Which apparently is like a really big thorn in her side, because she seems to be very upset about it. She's like, Crystal, get over the fact that you don't want to hang out with us. Like, Black Bolt can't even talk to me, okay? If I can deal with that, you can deal with Maximus, okay? Let's just figure it out. Number 4. Hawkeye. Hawkeye actually has to be one of the coolest heroes in these comics, and no, I am not joking. The way they revamped this character was so impactful that the version of the character was a major influence on their MCU counterpart when it came time to pen down what that Hawkeye would be like. Clint Barton in the comics is known for being a hot mess typically, but in the Ultimate Universe he was much more secretive, but also had a family. Tragically, his family ends up being found and killed in the process of enemies trying to hunt him down. When he is captured and severely mistreated by said captors, what does he do? He doesn't hang his head, he doesn't give up, he escapes, using his fingernails, his freaking fingernails as weapons. It doesn't get more badass than that. This Hawkeye does not even need arrows to be a deadly threat. I don't often get to hype Hawkeye here on Top 10 Nerd, so I just want to say thank you, Ultimate Universe, for giving me an opportunity to do so, because I do like Clint Barton, but we don't often get to put him at the top of these lists, or near the top, so yay. Number 3. Miles Morales. I know this is kind of a hot take when it comes to Spider-Man. I know there's some people in the comments who are gonna be like, I think Peter Parker is the best version. And that's fine, that's fair enough. But I really love Miles Morales in this role. Now, we do also have a Peter Parker in the Ultimate Universe of 1610, but he doesn't really do much to stand out for me in comparison to his main continuity counterpart. And don't get me wrong, I do love Peter Parker, but Miles is kind of like a breath of fresh air in some ways in comparison to the age-old hero. Why? Well, Peter has a tendency to be like really hard on himself. And aside from that, he's surrounded by tragedy at times. Honestly, there are runs where it feels like every time Peter turns a corner, a new tragedy might just be awaiting him around that corner. Miles actually has a family still living, and while he did lose his mom in the Ultimate Universe, it never really felt like a constant unresolved loss, like the death of Peter's Uncle Ben or his first love Gwen Stacy on Earth 616. And Rio, Miles' mom, is actually back now that the 1610 Miles has been permanently displaced, taking up residence in the 616 reality, and his family obviously is there with him. Miles also just has super cool powers. On top of much of what Peter has going on, Miles can also camouflage himself, and he has Venom Blast powers, so gotta give it to him. Sorry. Number 2, Gwen Stacy. Gwen Stacy is such an underrated character in the Marvel Ultimate Universe. On the Earth of 616, Gwen is, well, she's dead. Or she's probably dead. She might be showing up again soon, apparently, but it's probably a clone or a trick or something. I don't believe it's the original Gwen Stacy. She's been dead and gone for many years. I don't think she's ever really gonna come back. In the Ultimate Universe, Gwen also kinda dies, but also kinda doesn't. She's killed by Carnage, not an alien symbiote, but kind of a lab-made one in this reality, and in essence, her consciousness becomes merged with it, meaning that Carnage becomes Gwen, and Gwen becomes Carnage. So yeah, as freaky as that sounds, in the Ultimate reality, Gwen Stacy lives on as Carnage. It's freaky, and it's cool. Well, you might think this is the same as a clone Gwen in the 616 universe. It's not really. Because 1, she has the power of Carnage, and 2, she is an 100% exact biological duplicate who also possesses Gwen's mind up to the point of her death, which not all Gwen clones in 616 have, allowing Gwen to continue to grow and develop as she would have as a human, but simply with superpowers. Well, she only has superpowers for a bit, sadly. She has them until Eddie Brock's Venom assimilates Carnage, leaving her devoid of the symbiote and her powers going forward. I kinda wish she had stayed as Carnage, but it's fine. When she was Carnage though, I think that was super cool. Even though I know it was freaking her out, I thought she could have maybe become the new Carnage. That would have been neat. Number 1, the Maker. The Maker is the alternate version of Reed Richards. I actually have always felt that Richards might make a better villain than a hero, and the Maker seems to have been this thought made manifest. Living proof. Well, fictional living proof. The Maker initially started out as a hero, leader of the team known as the Fantastic Four. However, in the Ultimate Universe, his and Sue's future of marital bliss was not as much guaranteed. And in fact, after the tragedy of Ultimatum and Sue Storm turning down his marriage proposal, Richards got a different perspective on life, which inevitably turned him into a villain. In this universe, Reed had a rough childhood, and part of where his villainy started was in turning on his family. A family that had mistreated him as he saw it for years. Yeah, in this reality, Reed commits patricide and matricide to get back at his parents. Very counter to his Earth 616 alternate, and that version's relationship with his family.
Coming in at number 10 is Aunt May. Although extremely warm and caring, Aunt May in the 616 reality has often been portrayed as a somewhat bland, weak, and incredibly helpless character. Aunt May is constantly having health issues, and she's constantly worrying about Peter Parker because he's such a fragile boy. After half a century of development, the most exciting thing Aunt May has done in The Amazing Spider-Man is almost marrying Dr. Octopus. She's sweet, but I think we can do better. No offense. In the Ultimate Universe, Aunt May gets an overhaul. She's quicker, wittier, and a stronger character overall. When she finally figures out that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, she handles it like anyone would, with disappointment and anger that her closest family member didn't trust her enough to tell her. After a short while, Aunt May finally accepts the fact that her nephew is one of the world's greatest superheroes. After his true identity is revealed, Aunt May becomes someone Peter Parker looks to for advice and ultimately becomes the mother he never had, which is what she should have been. Number 9, Professor X. Professor X in the Ultimate Universe is the most powerful telepath on Earth, possessing vast psionic abilities and was known as one of the most powerful mutants ever. His mutation abilities give him telepathy, astral projection, and this version experiences some telekinetic skills as well, which is different from the 616 version. But honestly, he's here because he is just a little bit morally corrupt. He does things here in the name of the greater good that his 616 self wouldn't dare. There is an obvious example when we look at what happened with Iceman. Bobby was dating a girl at the time when he was inducted into the X-Men. Now this girl had the potential to convince Bobby to leave the X-Men, and Professor X did not like that. He used his powers to erase the memory of Bobby's girlfriend from his mind, just to keep Iceman on the team. He does things like this on the regular, and they often come back to bite him in the butt, which adds a layer to his character and storytelling which I personally find fun to explore. Number 8. Thor. This one may be purely based on the costume over everything else. It was an incredibly power-evoking style change that still called back to the original while trimming the unnecessary extras. But the other interesting thing that this version of Thor brings is a whole question over whether he is in fact a god or not. His full name in the Ultimate Universe is Thorleif Gullman, and he suffered a nervous breakdown before his 30th birthday and began having delusions of Asgard. He was drafted to a project at the Dome that was trying to recreate the super soldier serum that created Captain America, but instead, they went the biomechanical route and created a harness that provided the wearer with the abilities of flight, super strength, and limited invulnerability. Now, Thorleif Gullman, selected as the test subject, was fitted with the suit, but during the testing process, he started ranting about how he now believed he was actually the Norse god of thunder, like actually. For most of the Ultimate series, it was on the fence until the very end when it was finally confirmed that he was in fact the real Thor, marooned to Midgard with amnesia thanks to Loki's schemes. It's an interesting take on the character, and I think it's kinda cool. I like it. Number 7. Rogue. Similar to her Prime Universe version, Rogue, or Marion Carlisle, drains the life force and absorbs the memories and abilities of others through skin-to-skin contact, with the caveat being that she can end someone's life if she holds on too long. In the Ultimate Universe, Rogue actually gets picked up by the Weapon X program and is trained to use her abilities as an assassin. In the Prime Universe, it turns out using her powers on a mutant to the point of ending their life will actually permanently transfer these powers over to Rogue. This happened twice. First time was with Gambit. She drained his life force when he was already near the end after a fight with the mutant Juggernaut, and she gained his kinetic energy manipulation abilities plus sometimes his accent. The second time she did this, she drained the powers of Juggernaut himself when he was near death, gaining his abilities permanently, giving her the strength to throw cars, the durability to withstand demolishing buildings, super speed, and limitless stamina. Seeing Rogue wielding both Gambit's and Juggernaut's powers is strange, and yet very, very awesome. Number 6. Nightcrawler. Much like Rogue, the Ultimate Universe Kurt Wagner was kidnapped from Germany by Weapon X and brutally trained as one of their agents. But none of the brutal mistreatment dampened his spirits. He still remained true to his faith and even stopped Storm from killing the Weapon X commander. He was decidedly more serious than his main universe counterpart, and while some may not like that, I think it works here. I don't know. He struggled with his obvious physical differences, which made him lonely to the point of kidnapping Dazzler to manipulate her into falling in love with him. That part's not so great, but he did overcome his homophobia to be able to accept Colossus, which wins him a whole bunch of points. Also, his costume and overall look was just way better in my opinion. I don't know. Number 5. Captain America. Time to get controversial. Alright, look, many people hate that the Ultimate Universe turned Captain America into a nationalist, someone who would cheat, and someone who could criticize France. That's not what 616 Captain America would do. It's true, but this ain't 616, this is 1610, and here, things are a little bit more realistic. Sorry. The guy who runs around with the stars and stripes being a bit of a jerk from time to time? Hardly the worst offense in this world. The writers may have cleverly tried to embed the mindset of a common white man of his era and time, and I think they achieved that, even if fans hated it. This version of Captain America, while also being a bit of a jerk, is actually superhuman, as opposed to being just a peak level human being, which has him perform some pretty awesome feats. This power boost mixed with the fact that he is very willing to cheat and bend the rules to get the job done, he is a powerful character and should be as feared as he is respected. Maybe he isn't better in terms of morals or being a great guy, but he's what a real Cap would probably be like in my cynical brain, and in terms of sheer strength and power, I think he most definitely is better. Number 4, Mr. Sinister. Look, his Ultimate Universe version may not have the wow factor that his 616 self might. But in the Ultimate X-Men arc, the Tempest, the sorta goofy looking Victorian geneticist in a Liberace collar, Mr. Sinister, is reimagined as a schizophrenic street thug with a white tank top, weird tattoos, and a hat. And he's gunning down mutants to please his Lord Apocalypse, who isn't actually real and is actually an effigy Sinister has constructed out of trash. 4 issues of the X-Men chasing down a delusional mutant murderer were some of the best from the X-Men extended run in the Ultimate Universe, in my opinion. Number 3, Magneto. The Ultimate Universe Magneto moves backwards away from the anti-hero crafted by Chris Claremont and back towards a return to the genocidal, aspiring dictator originally written by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. And I'd say that he gets there quite successfully. In the first volume of Ultimate X-Men, Magneto attacks Washington DC with reprogrammed Sentinels, massacring civilians while having President George W. Bush stripped to nothingness groveling at his feet. He is utterly insane and completely terrifying, which could be seen as a negative by fans of his anti-hero persona, or, if you're like me, it's a giant win for a villain to be truly hateable and terrifying. Either way, this comes to its head in the divisive Ultimatum, where Magneto drowns New York City and kills dozens of heroes, including his old friend Professor X, when he reverses the polarity of the Earth in an insane show of power that sets the Ultimatum wave loose on the world. Number 2, Red Skull. In the Ultimate Universe, Steve Rogers and a girlfriend at the time, Gail Richards, shared a night together in 1945 before he went and got himself popsicled. 9 months later, out popped a baby that the government decided needed to be kept a secret. They took the boy into foster care on a military base, training him to become a super soldier to replace his father. He soon became stronger and more tactically skillful than Captain America, even though he seemed to be a perfect soldier. Rogers' son had been carefully planning his escape. Fast forward to 1963 when he was finally at the age of 17. The son went off the handle, de-lifing all the doctors and soldiers at the facility. He also used the kitchen knife to carve the skin from his head, officially and literally becoming the Red Skull. In rebellion against the system that created him, Red Skull was the one who planned President John F. Kennedy's send-off to the grave. He becomes a mentally unstable assassin and tries to eventually steal Reed Richards' plans for the Cosmic Cube in order to use it to change history so he could grow up with his father. It's just a way better backstory for a Red Skull, in my opinion. And at number 1, it is Peter Parker. For a lot of people, Brian Michael Bendis' legendary Ultimate Spider-Man run, the one that kicked off the whole Ultimate Universe, is among the best of the best Spider-Man runs ever. Peter Parker is a modern-day 15-year-old, still trying to balance his life as a teenager and his life as a superhero. What's different from this version when compared to the Amazing Spider-Man is that Peter Parker's life is much more relatable and digestible for anyone born in the past 25 years. For starters, Peter isn't a photographer when he first starts at the Daily Bugle. Being a tech-savvy teenager, our hero is one of the Daily Bugle's top web designers. J. Jonah Jameson also isn't a bumbling buffoon. He's a battle-tested, competent newspaper editor that's well aware of how to handle his staff. Spider-Man's interactions with other heroes are a bit more grounded in Ultimate Spider-Man, as well as his love life being much more entertaining and realistic. Whether it's Kitty Pryde or Mary Jane Watson, Peter Parker's love life never has a dull moment. Even Spider-Man's physical appearance makes more sense. Peter Parker has the build of a realistic nerdy teenager, and the costume's huge bug-eyed lenses make for the perfect representation of a youthful hero. And we haven't even mentioned his humor yet! One of the best scenes in any Spidey comic comes when Ultimate Spider-Man's version of the hero goes toe-to-toe with the Kingpin for the first time. During the battle, old Webhead pulls out note cards filled with fat jokes mocking Wilson Fisk's size. Like, come on, it's great.
Number 10, Jessica Drew. Jessica Drew is very different from her 616 counterpart. Now, while I personally prefer the 616 Jessica Drew as she is one of my favorite spider people of all time, I can understand why others might find the ultimate version of the character more intriguing. This version of Jessica Drew is not her own person. Quite the opposite. She is in fact a female clone of Peter Parker. She shares Peter's memories and even his feelings, which means that she too cares for Mary Jane as Peter did. She was created to be used as a weapon by the CIA, but before they could wipe her mind to clear out all of Peter's memories, which she shared, she and the fellow clones who were created alongside her escaped. With all the other clones also sharing Peter's memories, Jessica attempted to dissuade them from interfering in Peter's life, but ultimately failed in this regard. In the end, she would team up with Spider-Man to help him try and find Mary Jane, who it turned out had been kidnapped by Kane, another of Peter's clones, whose ultimate self was also known as as the imperfect or flawed clone, just as he is in 616. Number 9. Carol Danvers. Alas, this Carol Danvers doesn't have powers, like her 616 counterpart Captain Marvel, formerly known as Miss Marvel, does, but that doesn't make Carol any less awesome here. In fact, some would likely believe that the character actually might be improved without her cosmic abilities and her Kree heritage. This Carol Danvers is a high-ranking S.H.I.E.L.D. agent who would actually go on to become a replacement to the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., Nick Fury. To me, she embodies a lot of the military and tactical elements of Carol and possibly highlights those even more. Although sadly, she's not a pilot like Carol is on Earth 616. Carol would go on to lead the New Ultimates, and after her time with S.H.I.E.L.D. would actually become the chief of staff for the president, initially serving President Howard and afterwards greatly helping Steve Rogers, aka Captain America, when he became president thereafter. And friends, before we move on to the next spot, if you are loving our content here on Top 10 Nerd on YouTube, be sure to check us out over on Facebook, where we have lots of other content coming your way, and we're also gonna have some lots of cool different stuff, so be sure to check it out. Number 8. Galactus. While Galactus is an iconic antagonist on Earth 616, the unique take on the often supervillain and supremely powerful cosmic being was a refreshing one. Here, Galactus was still a global threat, but as opposed to being a giant cosmically powered man who can sometimes, let's be honest, be reasoned with and defeated that way, this version of the villain was a group of deadly drones that were less easily reasoned with. After coming to the reality of Earth 616, this group of drones, which once threatened the Earth of the Ultimate Universe, threatened instead the whole universe of Earth 1610 when they met and merged with the Galactus of the main continuity. Galactus of Earth 616 decided to make the Galactus his heralds, resulting in a deadly combination. Number 7. The Liberators. The Liberators are basically a more politically inspired version of the Masters of Evil, a more serious take on that villainous group. They're made up from heroes of various international rival nations who basically seek to destroy the Ultimates because they feel the US has an unfair advantage and needs to be put in their place. The crazy part is that a lot of their beef feels pretty justified and serves to expose some of the flaws in American nationalism throughout the story involving them, despite those like Captain America and the Ultimates being the heroes of that story, while the Liberators are still technically very much the villains. Number 6. Green Goblin. While not everyone is as big a fan of this version of Green Goblin, I for one am a pretty big fan. In the Ultimate Universe, Norman Osborn more literally mutated into a Green Goblin, a giant hulking green figure who is seemingly unstoppable and even suggested to be immortal. Not only that, but this version of Osborn was directly tied to Spider-Man, as it was his own formula that granted Peter his spider-like powers and abilities. Maybe not for everyone, but I think that is pretty cool. And sure, this Goblin wasn't stealthy in most cases in comparison to his 616 version, but he definitely comes across as more menacing and intimidating from a physical standpoint, at least. Number 5. Kitty Pryde. Once again, it is hard for me to say that I love the Ultimate Kitty Pryde more than the main continuity Kate Pryde of Earth 616, as I really love her dearly, but I will say that I think Ultimate Kitty Pryde had a lot of awesome stuff to offer, and that while still staying true to the heart of the character, differentiated her enough from her 616 self. And I really appreciate that, especially as a Pryde fan. Kitty in the Ultimate Universe was known for being headstrong and strong-willed. Despite her mom getting a promise from Professor X that Kitty, if enrolled in his school, would not go out on any X missions, Kitty was stubborn and snuck aboard the Blackbird to do so anyways. She would prove herself to be a formidable leader who many mutants looked up to over the years, and for a time would also be a close friend and even romantic partner of Spider-Man. The two would date and fight crime together. It was pretty cute. There is honestly a lot to love about the Ultimate Kitty Pryde. Number 4. Ben Grimm. As opposed to Ben Grimm, the college friend and roommate of Reed Richards, these two became friends when they were little kids and remained close throughout middle school. Just like in the 616 version of this story, Ben Grimm was a strong, athletic type who became the star of the football team, known by the nickname the Grim Reaper. However, it was also at this time that Reed was teased and mistreated a lot in school by other students because of his brilliant brilliant and unique mind, which made him stand out. Grimm stood up for Reed though and looked out for him, and in exchange Richards would help Ben with his homework. Eventually Reed would be recruited to working for the Baxter Building at a young age, and the two would be split up until years later when Grimm appeared to be in the Nevada desert near Reed's test area for his end zone experiment. Grimm joined Reed and the rest of his team, including Sue, Johnny, and Victor Van Dam, and witnessed the test, and as a result was changed forever. This version of Ben has a much more solid trajectory of accepting what he's become after he's transformed into the Thing, and although initially Sue and Reed are closer, eventually Reed ends up the odd man out, and Ben and Sue even end up together romantically, with Sue even proposing to Ben. Number 3. Silver Sable. Silver Sable has a somewhat darker origin story, if that's possible, in the Ultimate Universe. Instead of losing her mother and wanting to avenge her death, the young girl was often left to be raised by her mother, who frequently mistreated her. While she didn't know growing up, the truth that her father was absent was that he hunted down former World War II German soldiers, those who did awful things and were considered on the wrong side of the war. While on Earth 616, Silver Sable knew this and begged her father to train her. In the Ultimate Universe of Earth 1610, she didn't know of her father's true line of work until he was on his deathbed. She was brought by his associates to see him one last time, and he told her the truth about his work and apologized for not being there for her. With his dying breath, he said he wished he had had more time to teach her everything he knew. This inspired Silver Sable to follow in his footsteps, becoming a mercenary who used the money from her jobs to fund her own work and becoming the leader of the Wild Pack. Number 2. Betty Ross. In the Ultimate reality, it is Betty Ross and not Jennifer Walters who is She-Hulk. I don't think I prefer Betty's She-Hulk to Jen's She-Hulk per se, but I definitely prefer this version of Betty to the one from the main continuity of Earth 616. In this version of the story, Betty Ross fell for Bruce Banner shortly after college, but a wedge was driven between them when Bruce's work on recreating the super soldier serum and his obsession with testing on himself resulted in him being transformed into the Hulk. However, when director of S.H.I.E.L.D. Nick Fury planned to use Wolverine to hunt down the Hulk and eliminate him, Betty Ross decided she had to do something. While she didn't have the rank or clearance to really interfere with the decision and the mission, and she was unable to convince the other heroes to help her, she took matters into her own hands by stealing a non-rage-inducing version of the Hulk formula made by Jennifer Walters. Betty took this formula herself in pursuit of the Hulk and Wolverine and was transformed into the She-Hulk. Number 1. Colossus. As with many other characters on our list, Colossus of the Ultimate Universe had a much more tragic upbringing than his 616 counterpart. On Earth 616, Colossus grew up on a collective farm in Russia, spending much of his spare time painting when not working on the farm, a talent he showed great affinity for. However, in the 1610 version of the character's origin, Colossus's Pyotr Rasputin fought in the Cold War, where the secret that he was a mutant was revealed to Anatol Spichkin. Spichkin promised Pyotr work should he ever need, and agreed to keep his secret. In this reality, Colossus's skin turns to steel, but it doesn't really come with super strength, so to work for Anatol he would take a drug known as Banshee to grant himself super strength to go along with his skin's durability. This Colossus is also gay, but spends most of his life in the closet in regards to this. When his father first found out, he was ashamed of Pyotr, and as such Pyotr has struggled most of his life, worried about the secret of his sexual orientation being revealed. His story is uplifting and empowering, and while different, is possibly even better than the 616 narrative for Colossus.